Hey, everybody. My name is Tom Libby, and welcome to the GrowthCraft podcast. I'm typically with my co-host, Hasan Sorrells, but unfortunately, he is not with us today. He's on vacation. So we're going to wish him well on that and hope he gets back healthy, safe, and well-rested. To jump into it, today on the GrowthCraft podcast, we are designing this podcast with the startup in mind. We are committed to growing your connections to the GrowthCraft advisors, increasing your engagement with the GrowthCraft community, and growing your knowledge all about the benefits that GrowthCraft can provide you and your founding team. We can't wait to bring you along this journey with us and our guest today. Here on the podcast, we interview startup founders, advisors, such as my guest today, and others about their journey, their process, their product, and just as important, their interaction with GrowthCraft. So today we'd like to welcome JP. JP, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
All right, excited to be here.
Good. So we'll jump right in. The first question is always the easiest, right? So it's one of those things that we answer probably 18 times a day when we get on our networking kind of kicks and stuff like that. But so JP, tell us kind of who you are, what you do, what your company does. Give us a little insight as to what your day looks like.
All right, great. Well, JP Puchulu is my name. And I am the managing partner at Boston Startup CFO. And what we do is we help with finance, right? So I'm the finance advisor in GrowthCraft. And what do we mean by finance? Well, anything from bookkeeping through the accounting that needs to get done, through the controllership, all the way through CFO level stuff. So what we're looking at is early stage startups. A lot of times they do the bookkeeping on their own for as long as they can. And hopefully they come see us before they get in front of investors so that we can clean up some of the messes that they might have created. And then we handle their bookkeeping on a month-to-month basis. Now, sometimes we might just even do a cleanup project. So a lot of times in the early stages, a lot of startups can't afford us, and we want to help with that. We don't necessarily want to take your money if it's not going to provide enough value, and that happens sometimes where companies will clean up the books, and then startups will just stay with them on a month-to-month basis because they don't want to give that up. Well, what we do sometimes, we'll clean up the books and then just put a pause on it. And then when they get funding, we can keep things going. So that's what we do on the early stage bookkeeping side. But that's not where we make our bread and butter. We're trying to build a relationship so that when startups are funded, then we're taking care of them, taking care of their bookkeeping, taking care of their accounting, and then things get more complex from there. And on the CFO side, we help anywhere from helping early stage with their financial projections, for example, to anything that a startup could need from a finance perspective. Our CFOs typically work for like Fortune 500 companies, and then they decide, okay, I want to do the fractional thing with startups because it's just more fun, have more control of their time and everything like that. So some of them will come work for us, and we put together engagements where we customize things to set things up for startups and help them to succeed.
Pretty awesome. So one of the things that I always get fascinated by, people think of like the finance part of it as like not sexy or exciting or like, and they're always like either product or sales and marketing, right? Like those are the two fun buckets. I tend to disagree, only in the sense that finance can be very intriguing because if you don't know and understand it, then the rest of that stuff doesn't matter anyway, right? How do you feel? Like, does that resonate with you? Like, do you feel the same way sometimes? Like, that you
my God.
You get the
whenever
sometimes about the excitement part.
Yeah. So whenever I get to talk to a founder that has some level of finance experience, I get giddy. I get all excited. I'll tell you why. Because it's a different level, right? Because what you're talking about when you talk about finance, you're talking about a strategic element that will take your business to the next level in a way that if you don't understand finance, it's going to be much more difficult for you to get there, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, you talk about marketing and you talk about all these different things that people do have experience with. They might not have experience with finance. Well, if you can plug in finance into marketing and understand how much money you should actually be spending and figure out from there how your outlook will look from a marketing perspective for the next 5 years, I don't know. I find that really fun. Right? So yeah, I really enjoy it and sometimes founders don't even have any finance experience, but at least they're finance curious.
Yeah.
And that's good enough, because what that means is that they're present for those conversations. Because we get a lot of technical founders, for example, will just kind of shut down and abdicate the entire finance and bookkeeping function, right? I don't know, those engagements. I mean, we can help a lot, but where's the fun in that?
Yeah.
Because when we can plug in that finance and really talk about strategy and talk about next steps in a way that they can understand of the value that advice is bringing, that's fun.
So you might have actually already answered part of this next question, but because it's really based on like, why do you do what you do? Like why do you get excited and get up in the morning, or what prompted you to get involved in this part of the business function to begin with? So give us the story behind Boston Startup CFO, how your involvement came to be, and that kind of, and why this is exciting for you.
All right, cool. So, all right, I got out of college in the 90s, and in the early 2000s, I started a mortgage company. So money's always interested me ever since I was a little kid, and I was setting up the lemonade stands and then selling stuff at the lemonade stands, and so money's always been interesting to me. So I had a mortgage company, and if you know anything about the history of economics and what happened in the 2000s, so that's not the end of that part of the story. Is not very pleasant, but we'll skip all that. But after that, after the financial crisis, I had to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do now? So that got me into accounting, because it's still money, and I thought it'd be interesting, but I just hated tax. But again, I've always liked finance. So that got me into this company that was selling finance, more on the bookkeeping side, a little bit on the finance side, right? A little bit of CFO services. And they had a high minimum monthly cost to get started, right? $1,200 doesn't make sense for startups. That was their minimum for the bookkeeping. And my favorite part of that job was going to the Cambridge Innovation Center and talking to startups. And it'd just be really exciting conversations, getting to understand what excites them and what they're working on, and learning a little bit about technology, because I'm not always the smartest guy I'm actually never the smartest guy in the room when it comes to technology. Well, almost never, because we've got Chuck in GrowthCraft, but it's always interested me, So I was having a lot of those conversations, but constantly striking out because the startups I was talking to were just, too early stage. So when I was working for that company, this is back in like 2016 or so, I had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Boston Startup CFO, John Bailey. And I sat down with John, and, here's another guy with a lot of excitement about what he does, right? Excited about finance, excited about helping startups. And he showed me his marketing ideas, right? He had just a lot of great marketing content that he had put together, and he had a great vision for bringing finance to these earlier stage companies. Now, again, early stage companies, that's not our bread and butter. That's not where we make much money, but that's where you get to really help people. And when you really help people, that really develops relationships, right? And I've always been a relationship guy. So if you can build that foundation with someone and really help them out beyond what somebody else will, you've got somebody that you've built a relationship for life. So John was telling me about his vision for Boston Startup CFO, and it just really excited me. Again, my favorite part of what I was doing was working with startups. So I said to him, John, all right, you're just getting started, because he had just opened up Boston Startup CFO. I said to him, I can't imagine that you're looking for somebody to bring on at this point. But in the future, if you ever want to expand Boston Startup CFO, let me know. So in 2021, toward the end of the pandemic, like we were just starting to end that whole thing, that whole element there. He contacted me on LinkedIn, and he said, I'm ready to talk. And he didn't really have to convince me. There was not much convincing having to go on there. I was just really excited for it, because I again love working with startups. So that's what got me into it. Brought me on as a salesperson first, and just very quickly, just promoted me and had me do all the different aspects of what needs to get done, and made me the managing partner.
So I feel like we know an awful lot about this now, right? Now that we've had these first few questions, and we know a lot about the why and who you're helping and all this stuff. But what I think what the most pressing thing for me now is, why Boston Startup CFO from the startups perspective, right? Like, why do people choose you? Why do startups or any other company for that matter? What is it about Boston Startup CFO that you think makes them choose you guys over your competition?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. I can talk about some of them. One of them I already mentioned, and that's relationships, because relationships are important, right?
Of course.
But it's a lot more than that. So one example, one thing might be the fact that we work, or some of our CFOs work exclusively with startups, right? So they've got that startup exclusivity. So what does that mean for the startup? Well, you need startup expertise, because we've had clients come to us and say, I've been working with this CFO firm, and it just seems like they don't understand startups, because they're very different. They have a lot of different needs than a Fortune 500 company might, or even a SME might have, right? Especially around investors. You really need to know your way around investors and know how they think in order to be able to help a startup properly, right? And that's from the CFO side. From the bookkeeping side, we've got customized solutions. So a lot of our competitors that do bookkeeping, and a lot of them just do bookkeeping exclusively, they try to fit companies into a box. You can't fit a startup into a box, because they're not going to get what they need. So we have customized solutions. Anything that you need. We even help with some non-finance functions if it's just a little task that they need done, and there's nobody else to do it. We can do that as well, right? So that startup exclusivity is an important part. Another part is that our firm has deep resources, right? So this is another place where startups will come to us and tell us about a problem that they're having, where they've been working with a CFO, and they're growing, but their CFO doesn't have any more hours that they can spend with them, because they've got other clients. So that happens with us as well. What happens with those other CFOs is, well, they can't help a lot of times, because they're already maxed out, right? So yes, they can't even help with the transition. So at the worst time, when a startup gets funding, they need to take off. They need to scale. They can't be dealing with finding a new CFO. So if that happens to us, we've got these resources, and we can shift our resources around. So what does that mean? Well, sometimes it means that if our CFO, if you're scaling and our CFO is filled up with their time, what we can do is we can take a smaller engagement and send it to another CFO so that the CFO you've been working with can continue working with you, right? So that's one thing we can do. Or if that's not possible, we can bring in another CFO that has plenty of time to and the availability to scale in the way that we now know you're going to need to scale. So let's say our CFO has been working with you for 20 hours per week. Now you need 40 hours, but next year you're going to need 60. You're going to need, I'm sorry, 20 hours per month. So now you need 40 hours per month. Next year you're going to need 60 or 80 per month. But you're not ready for a full-time CFO yet. We can bring in that CFO, and the old CFO can transition the new CFO. So it's not needed that you even, need to step in. You don't even, we make you aware of what's happening, but we take care of that transition. So that's another reason. And, a few others, no minimums and things like that. But actually, one that I think is very interesting to talk about, and that's GrowthCraft. Because here's what I do, right? I'm not a CFO. I'm not the bookkeeper controller. I am the one bringing the business in, but I'm also the one that helps with any customer service needs. And I'm also the one that if you have needs outside of finance, first time I talk to you, I bring that up and I say, listen, if you have any needs, any other services that you need, or any challenges, I've got this network that I can plug into that I can help you solve those needs. So if it's another service provider that you need, I've got somebody for you that is going to take excellent care of you, that I know and trust and have worked with. And I will collaborate with that person. So, as an example, HR or marketing or the attorney, all of these people, I will collaborate with them. I know them. So that's going to bring a lot of value to the table. So that's the answer to your questions, I hope.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. It was missing one that I expected you to say.
All right.
That, people, why they do it. It's just you, right? Like
it's me.
You're well, in fairness, you kind of did say that by using and leveraging your network as a resource, but there is a lot of value in you as a individual to Boston Startup CFO, and you bring a lot more value than just Boston Startup CFO to your clients. That's so I thought you were just going to say me. I'm the number one reason they do business with us.
So to expand beyond what you just said, if you ask my wife and you ask my mother, they will both tell you that I do well in my job because of my good looks.
We'll invite them on the podcast. We'll invite them on the podcast next.
There you go.
Right, so the next question here, I think, is going to be very brief, only because I think we've already answered a lot of it in a previous question, because it's really around like, what does the engagement look like, or how do people work with you? And I think you've already answered a pretty high majority of that. So let's just simplify the question here. Do you work? Is it just you send them a monthly bill, they pay the monthly bill, and you solve, or you perform all the tasks at hand? Or is there incremental pieces to it, or is it just, or does that increment only happen if their needs change? Let's ask it that way. So I think you've answered a lot more of that question earlier.
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated, and the reason it's complicated is because of the flexibility.
Okay.
So as I said earlier, we don't put companies in a box. We don't say this is the way that we need to interact with you, right? We say, okay, let's lay out your needs and figure out the best strategy to take care of it. So on the bookkeeping side, what we like to do is we like to have a monthly reoccurring rate that doesn't change until the factors change, right?
Right.
So we'll say, okay, this is going to be, we have rates as low as $375. So we say, okay, it's going to be $375 a month. And until things just get a little unwieldy, we'll keep you there. And then we'll have a discussion and say, okay, so when we first came on, we talked about this, now we've added this, and this. So we need to increase your rate up to this. And we have that conversation and we come to agreement, because sometimes that's not what's in the best interest of the startup, right? Sometimes it's, okay, we really need to stay at 375. So why don't I, as the startup, do the invoices from now on?
Yeah, right.
That type of thing, right? So it's a discussion to figure out what's really best for the startup.
I think that's my favorite part, JP. Honestly, I think that's my favorite part of talking with you, is that it's never it's not like a rate sheet. It's not a tiered approach. It literally is, we're going to figure this out. We're going to strategize with the startup, and we're going to make it worth it for everybody involved, right? That's the best part.
And that's where we're different than other CFO firms, because the flexibility that we provide. I'll give you another quick story about how we really help startups. So this happens, not a lot, but it does happen with somewhat frequency, is that we'll engage with a CFO, with a client, and let's say they need us for 10 hours a month, right? They just got $2 million in funding. They've got, let's say, 2 years of runway. Well, what ends up happening is they start running out of money, and they still need us, but it's no longer at that 20 hours per month level. So we say, don't worry about it. You still need us. I think you need us for, let's say, 4 hours a month. So let's cut back to 4 hours a month. We'll still help you, with the investors, and help you with this, and that. And that way we can bring your bill way down and give you more runway, right? So just a lot of flexibility depending on what the needs are.
It's pretty awesome. So this next question, I couldn't wait to ask you, honestly, because every one of the other members we've had on, advisors we've had on, we're talking about, this is the point where we switch gears and we ask them specifically about GrowthCraft. Well, for you, I was excited because this question is going to be totally different, because most of the time we're asking people what attracted them to GrowthCraft. Why do they stay involved with GrowthCraft? Why is GrowthCraft a good idea for them from either a business perspective, or for you, it's different, right? Because you're one of the founding members. So you started this whole thing. So I guess my question for you is, why? What is GrowthCraft to you, and why did you think this was a big deal, and why do you think it's going to be wildly successful the way I do? And we've never interviewed me on the podcast, by the way, but I will also say that I feel like we're going to be wildly successful with this. What is GrowthCraft to you, and why GrowthCraft? What is all this about?
Yeah, great question. So, all right. So I mentioned that back in the 2000s, I had a mortgage company, right? So what I did when I had the mortgage company was I wanted to join this networking organization called BNI, Business Network International. And what they do, it's really more geared for B2C. And I wanted to join, and there were plenty of chapters. I was in the Worcester area. There were a number of chapters, but all of them had a mortgage person. So I couldn't join any one of those. And I really liked the concept of a networking group. So what I did was I started my own, and it went great. In 2 years, we got it up to like 35 members, which is a decent chapter. What really stayed with me was this, right? So I was in the mortgage business. I was in what they call in BNI, the real estate sphere. And I had a real estate attorney, a realtor, an insurance guy, an appraiser. We were all in this real estate sphere. And we ended up working like this incredible unit. What would happen, a new client, then we'd ask, okay, do you have an attorney yet? Do you have a realtor? Do you have an appraiser? Do you have an insurance guy? And whoever they didn't have yet, we would, bring in that advisor into the engagement here. And what ended up happening after a little while is we would work so well together. Like we would see, I don't know if you've done many real estate transactions, but they're bumpy, right? There's issues always, right? But what we were able to do is we would get on the phone and say, hey, you know, this is happening. And we would work through the issue. So a lot of times the client would never even be aware that we had kind of stomped on a red flag before it ever became a problem. And we got really good at doing that. And, you know, after the financial crisis, I had to leave the BNI. Very, very sad, because I love those people. But that kept that in the back of my mind. So when I started working with startups, I just felt like, boy, if I could get that kind of a relationship together again to help startups where we would collaborate, we would talk to each other, we would help like beyond the scope of our individual services, because sometimes we were helping in ways that was beyond real estate by bringing somebody else into something that had nothing to do with real estate. So what if we could do that with startups? And that just got me really excited. So that was really the reason why I wanted to create something that ended up evolving into GrowthCraft.
Yeah, and again, I think we're gonna show some real value in that whole differentiator where, like you're talking with your real estate sphere, we basically did that with the whole functions of business sphere, right? So that's the whole idea behind GrowthCraft. So that's very cool. Well, we're kind of at the end of the podcast here. This is the opportunity we usually take to have people let people know how to find them, where to find them, how things are going on. Also, if you have speaking engagements planned or things like that that you think that we can announce here on the podcast, we'll give you just a minute or two to kind of throw that out there too. But how do people connect with you? Where are they looking for you at this point?
All right, great. Well, I am on LinkedIn, and look up JP Puchulu, because Jean-Pierre is just way too high maintenance. So I'm in there as JP as well. My website is Boston Startup without an S. So bostonstartupcfo.com. You can check out my blogs. I got some blogs on there, and it tells you a lot about what we do and how much we charge and things like that on the website. What else? Definitely check out growthcraft.org. And, if you've been listening to this podcast, you probably know about the assessment. Maybe not. I'm sure we'll bring it up if we haven't, but take that assessment. I'm sure you'll get some benefit from it. Where else? Speaking engagements. If you go on my LinkedIn, I just moderated a panel on different types of finance, dilutive, non-dilutive, and debt, and the benefits, pros and cons of each. What else? I don't know. I think that's it. I'm not on Facebook or anything.
That's good enough. That's good enough. But so that brings us to the end of the podcast. Last few tidbits from us, from the host here. As JP mentioned more than once, check out growthcraft.org if you haven't already. We're also on social media, mostly LinkedIn. We also do workshops and we have founders forums and things like that. So for our members, there's a lot to do and a lot to love about GrowthCraft from a startup's perspective. And then, of course, you get to interact with people like us. So we're here to help, and we're here to to help you move your journey along as seamlessly and effortlessly as possible. So JP, thank you very much for joining us here on the podcast, and we're loving life so far. So we'll, again, wildly successful. That's my prediction.
Let's do it. And we're here to help, and we're excited to do it.
For sure. Thanks, everybody.